Hey, what is up my brothers? This is Enemy Stand User and welcome to a very special and kinda different video going over a hypothetical Yuji Itadori versus Megumi Fushiguro matchup. And I was inclined on making this video seeing on how a lot of people in the JJK community view these two characters, so I kinda want to get a rundown on both of their strengths and their weaknesses as opponents, or rather as Jujutsu sorcerers, and where they scale in terms of power in Jujutsu Kaisen. At the end, I will say which side I lean more favorably toward to win and in this sort of what if battle. With all that being said though, I love both characters in JJK. I understand if you might not agree with me on some points, but that's okay. You're all my brothers and I would love to hear your thoughts on this and whose camp that you are in. I wouldn't normally make a video like this, but I kind of want to explore different types of videos inspired by fellow content creators, and I really want to just fully exhaust all current knowledge that we have of these characters and compare them to the best of my abilities. So spoilers, I will be covering knowledge from the manga up to chapter 173 onward. But without lingering on any further, let's look into a battle between Yuji Itadori and Megumi Fushiguro.
Dark wave. Break it down.
Yuji is very new to the world of Jujutsu, only being around supposedly for a couple of months. However, he is already a monster when it comes to combat, and even before joining the Sorcerers and becoming Sukuna's vessel, Yuji was special. He was far more capable and stronger than average people. In all trueness, he is superhuman. Recently, it is revealed that he is the biological, blood-related child to Kenjaku, a very ancient and important sorcerer in Jujutsu history. And while I really do not want to dwell on that weird thought too much, that could really be a reason why Yuji is so good in terms of his power and why he's so strong and capable as a sorcerer, even being Sukuna's vessel. Yuji, after eating Sukuna's finger way back in chapter 1, completely skyrocketed as a fighter, and now that Sukuna and Yuji share the same body, Yuji now has access to his very own cursed energy reserves that leaked from Sukuna. And although Yuji does not possess much cursed energy altogether, his use of cursed energy is great and revolves around him reinforcing his body with it and making it so that his attacks and hits are amplified using his cursed energy. In terms of raw fighting ability, Yuji is likely one of the most proficient fighters in the verse, praised even by Fushiguro, Gojo, and Yuta, being a force likened to that to Maki with her heavenly restriction. That is the level of title martial arts skills Yuji has reached, to where he is recognized as one of the best hand-to-hand combatants on the sorcerer's side. His growth is so fast that just fresh after learning the basics of cursed energy and Jujutsu taught under Gojo, he was able to keep up with seasoned grade 1 sorcerer Todo and fight special grade Hanami right along with Todo. Yuji is an extremely special case in the series, to where it seems like he does just fine as a sorcerer with just basic application of cursed energy. Even during the Goodwill Festival arc, Yuji without a doubt was competing at a level at least worthy of a grade 1 title, I would say. And he has a lot more going on for him than a lot of his other peers at the school who have more experience. Heck, he even has more potential than most of the teachers at Jujutsu High, to be honest. Nanami praised Yuji's ability and regarded his potential that he could reach high heights in this Jujutsu world if Yuji was to really mix his combat prowess with a fully realized curse technique. It seems like everyone who fights around Yuji immediately picks up just how different he is compared to average shamans. Instead of Yuji relying on a certain ability to win a fight, Yuji uses his basic cursed energy manipulation and his martial arts skills to rigorously break down opponents. He is a combat expert, so let's look at some impressive tools and feats that Yuji has shown throughout the manga. Just to get this out of the way, did you know Yuji's main ability, Divergent Fist, is not actually a proper curse technique? It was born out of Yuji's bad habits and his inexperience and his lack of control. So when his energy flares up from his fist, there is a clear lag or delayed second impact that happens where his main output is delayed. This would normally be a burden, but because Yuji is such an amazing and strong fighter, his hits are already powerful enough. Then the delayed second impact added on makes for a very deadly power that could really, any sorcerer could learn this technique and use it, but this is specifically tailored to Yuji's style and his brawler type style combat. More recently in the series though, we've seen Yuji fully control Divergent Fist, shown against fighting Chozo and Mahito, both fights I'll reference later on. But another card Yuji has, of course, is his raw fighting power using martial arts. And I think Todo even stated himself that Yuji was indeed stronger than him. The brother himself saw Yuji's potential and refined him into a combat machine. After fighting with Todo, and with only at best a couple of months of training with cursed energy, Yuji was exchanging blows with special grade cursed Hanami, and fully kept up with the pace of the battle, being an integral part on Team Brother. Yuji was so in the moment and concentrated in this battle with his martial arts prowess that he was able to land a Black Flash, which only a handful of people in the verse have even been confirmed users. And after his first use, he landed 3 more. It is impossible to perform Black Flash at will. However, Yuji is so amazing that it seems like he is doing it at will. And from then on, Yuji keeps getting stronger. In Shibuya vs Chozo, I feel this is a battle that really showcases just what Yuji's limits are, because he was up against the Kamo clan's blood manipulation power, and Chozo is an expert at using the ability far more creatively than Kamo as a comparison. But in this fight, we could see Yuji's fighting ability is reaching a climax. It was not enough, as it was overwhelmed by the blood manipulation power, and Yuji ended up taking on serious damage, forced to use Mechamaru's plan to change up the battle on his terms, using water to change Chozo's attack style. And even if ultimately this matchup ended in Yuji's defeat, it more than showcased Yuji's physical endurance and his resolve despite facing a threat stronger than him. Even Chozo took notice that Yuji only landed about 3 hits, yet he took on so much damage. Yuji is a real challenger in a fight. Against Mahito as well, Yuji has amazing looks as a sorcerer, and while mainly I would say his specific circumstance made it so that Sukuna was always a factor inside of Yuji thanks to his soul protection and healing factor, that just made Yuji all the more dangerous against a curse like Mahito, now that he could hurt him. Mahito had to use his adaptability idle transfiguration both in the reverse punishment arc and in the Shibuya arc to perform physical attacks to pierce Yuji and kill him normally. So Yuji had to adapt as well to endure Mahito's onslaught of various body morphs and his weapons on top of Mahito's genius cursed energy control. And although Yuji did receive a big help during the battles and in the end during the final hour against Mahito's killing spirit form, Yuji was still able to come out on top, showcasing that all that he learned, controlling Divergent Fist, baiting Mahito, and ending the battle with a maximum input Black Flash. And now, post Shibuya, Yuji came out as a intense combatant with flawless cursed energy control and a combat ability, with Chozo actually calling Yuji a demon god. So Yuji is really now starting to grow along with Sukuna's power, 15 fingers deep, and during the Culling games he's been looking really clean. But now I gotta talk about his flaws as a fighter in JJK. One of Yuji's biggest weak points is his range. Yuji has no real answer to powerful ranged sorcery, and we see how badly he fares against proper techniques like the blood manipulation and cursed spear manipulation. In Chozo's case, Yuji was completely outclassed in this bad matchup, being that Chozo has an endless supply of blood and the attacks would just persist. Yuji tried to rush him, but the overall balance in Chozo's defense and combat was too great, and Yuji ended up taking more damage on trying to get up in close from Supernova. He had to retreat into the bathroom and use water to nerf Chozo, and that actually was a really smart idea from Mechamaru, because it put Chozo more on Yuji's terms. But in the end, it really came down to actual technique and ability, and Chozo just damaged Yuji way too much, and Yuji's hits were really not effective against Chozo down to his last try, where Yuji was ultimately defeated despite finding newfound resolve. In Kenjaku's example, Yuji was completely dunked on and outmatched, as the cursed spear manipulation power is a very extremely unfair matchup for Yuji, and he literally could not even get close. The power just piled on way too many attacks. This weakness is actually very good for Megumi because that really is the environment where Shikigami users thrive in, long to mid-range combat. Another one of Yuji's flaws is his overall lack of curse technique. JJK revolves around sorcerers using abilities and revealing abilities, yet Yuji doesn't have anything proper to use in combat besides basic curse energy control. He has virtually no cards to play when it comes to his curse technique, and normally I would forgive that based on us. We actually do see individuals with little or no cursed energy like Maki and Toji. However, Yuji is not that physically gifted to that level, and I feel he needs something more to bring him to that next level, even if it's something seemingly small like Simple Domain. And I think most sorcerers, no matter what the level, they need Simple Domain as a countermeasure to domain expansion, because that is the difference in life or death or their defeat. Domains usually are a one and done I win scenario, and if you have literally anything to fight against that, you should use it. It's like life or death. Yuji only survived Mahito's domain because of Sukuna and the soul, but in any other domain, it's fair play. In Higuruma's domain, he really had to play by the rules and could not do a thing. Even when he figured out about the silver lining with the retrial, Yuji was still in a really bad position and was going to be killed again if not for Higuruma's sense of justice stopping that technique. Yuji is very handicapped not being able to use a curse technique or defend against curse techniques. He always has to compensate with his physical stats and basic jujutsu. Sometimes that is enough when fighting weaker opponents or sorcerers that are still strong but have less potent curse techniques, but it also has its limits, like we saw from Chozo and Kenjaku's example. Yuji he really cannot be ignored as a demon god for his raw, beast-like combat prowess and potential as a sorcerer. And when you compare both what Yuji had to deal with what Megumi matchups were, I could definitely see Fushiguro still struggling a lot as well if you kind of mix and match their opponents. Yuji had to fight Mahito, Chozo, Todo, Hanami, and even Yuta, and he definitely caught L's in some of those matchups, but I have to admit, Yuji did really well considering he has no technique and he's not even a year experience as a sorcerer. Even now during the culling games, he's throwing literal rocks at people and defeating them. Even to this small degree, that's really nuts, and he's just exploding his potential as a shaman in his own sort of style. But is all of this really enough to defeat his rival and his friend Megumi Fushiguro in an all-out battle? Let's find out. Megumi is a very unique sorcerer in all aspects of his character. If I'm being honest, I myself personally have a very love-hate relationship with Megumi as a combatant, because when he started out in the series, Megumi was really kind of underwhelming. Or rather, you could say Megumi was just comfortable kind of being stagnant in his growth as a sorcerer. If I'm being blunt, he was not really a crazy person like everyone else, excluding of course what happened in the Origin of Obedience arc, but it seemed like Megumi was constantly limiting himself in his own potential, trying to fulfill this sort of support role as a sorcerer, and like Gojo said, everyone else is giving it their all while Megumi chooses to sacrifice himself and stay on the sidelines, so to speak. Megumi was always ready to settle for second place without giving it his all, and when he was ready to stand up and show what he's got, someone else stole the spotlight or circumstances just didn't allow it. And we all know for dang sure what he was trying to pull out. From what we know now, we know what he was trying to pull out during all these moments. I would bet Megumi would definitely pull out MAHORAGA against a freaking flyhead if he had to. Like anytime he's stressed or does not know what to do, it's automatically time to sacrifice himself like some crazy kamikaze move. But now Megumi is kind of moving away from that mindset, and now what we've been seeing recently, along with what Gojo stated, Megumi is a whole lot stronger than what he himself gives himself credit for. I think before even considering power, many of us fans have to think about the role confidence plays in a sorcerer's growth and their potential in JJK. It does not matter what the ability is. If you have good understanding, imagination, and a little bit of crackhead energy, you can be a powerful sorcerer. Think about the difference between characters like Miwa compared to Aoi Todo. Miwa has much more of a combat and treasure-oriented fighting technique, in contrast to something like Boogie Woogie. But there's no way Miwa would ever engage Todo in a confrontation based on both characters' skill and confidence in their own ability. The same applies to Megumi. Sukuna called him a wasted treasure, and in their brief fight, Sukuna told him to put more curse into his strikes. And when you think about that, when you curse a person, it can't be half-assed. You have to believe in your strength. And at the beginning of the story, this was Megumi's problem. And if we're going to get into another example, it could be kind of unrelated, but Yuta actually grew when he started to feel anger and really wanted to curse and kill Geto Suguru. So a sorcerer's feelings are low-key kind of a big deal going into a sorcerer battle. However, Megumi is overcoming this habit, and when we see his determination MAHORAGA in all of its glory finally, Megumi has already started to show just how well-rounded he is as a fighter. Megumi now is a grade 2 sorcerer, also a student taught under Gojo's guidance. He is now currently the 27th head of the renowned Zenin clan, and only him and Maki live as the last 2 remaining Zenin in the clan, due to Maki pulling a Itachi move on her own family. But Megumi is blessed with the Zenin's coveted 10 Shadows technique, and this power is unique in the fact that it allows a sorcerer to use multiple Shikigami and thus have a variety in their attack. Megumi stated the 10 Shadows ability starts when a sorcerer receives 2 divine dogs, to which they can use the help of the dogs to exercise and amass up to 10 Shikigami. So far, Megumi has 6 under his control that we know of, being Divine Dogs, Nue, Toad, Great Serpent, Max Elephant, and Rapid Escape. All of these Shikigami so far give Megumi a lot of moves to work with, and unlike other Shikigami users, Megumi is not afraid to get up close and mix close quarters combat with his curse technique. Over the course of the story, Megumi has now started to gain better understanding of his 10 Shadows technique and actually started utilizing the actual shadows more in his fighting style. Now able to use the shadows to dip in and out of spaces, making for a very useful combat method. Megumi is also a curse tool user, being shown using Playful Cloud, but opting to use something he's more specialized to, more like a short sword style weapons. This is a really big brain play on Megumi's part, because now that makes it so that he always has access to a sort of weapons cache, and he won't really have to expend as much cursed energy when he hits using his cursed tools, so he could fight for longer prolonged periods of time. We saw how well he endured in his latest fight with Reggie, and unlike Yuji, Megumi actually has a variety of tools that he could use in combat, ranging from his Shikigami to his literal cursed tools. Megumi is very well rounded, and we haven't even talked about his feats in the series yet. First up for Megumi's main feat is his ability to perform domain expansion. His domain, titled Chimera Shadow Garden, is actually still incomplete, even up to the Koen games. Megumi has a very hard time manifesting his own space without the help of set barriers, whether it's another domain or using a physical space to help, like a gym. But you really cannot blame him, as barrier techniques are extremely difficult for sorcerers to pull off, and domains are often regarded as the peak of sorcery. However, just because this domain is incomplete does not mean it's useless. This domain, when it is first used in the Origin of Obedience arc against a finger bear, still improved Megumi's overall cursed energy control and his output, as in this instance, Megumi can use a Sea of Shadow to summon multiple Shikigami at the same time, as well as continue to use the Shadow Dip ability to pressure and overwhelm an opponent. This usage of the domain in this state was enough to take down a finger bearer in the Shibuya incident was capable to the degree where it was used in a domain tug of war battle against special grade Dagon, able to break through his barrier and hold his own, pushing back against Dagon's domain, allowing the sorcerer's time to escape, or rather for help to arrive. Megumi really did amazing enduring Dagon's more refined domain, and that experience no doubt helped Megumi grasp better understanding of his own barrier. And in the Culling games, Megumi truly showed why his curse technique is treasured, and he kicked his domain control up a notch, using the confines of a gym to trap his opponent Reggie Star in Chimera Shadow Garden. Reggie tried to defend himself with simple domain, however due to Megumi's barrier being incomplete, the guaranteed hit effect was void, and now we're in a situation where Megumi is in his own territory, the opponent can't gain any ground, and Megumi now has full use of the 10 Shadows technique. He could use Shadow Clones to overwhelm targets, multiple Shikigami to pin down and attack targets. He could even use the shadow itself to drown opponents in the shadow. If you were stuck in Megumi's domain, you would be forced to keep up a constant flow of cursed energy just to keep yourself from sinking in the shadow. Although the domain is still incomplete, Megumi was very much in his element, and his potential was brought out to 120% inside of his barrier. If not for Reggie's quick thinking to weigh down Megumi and slow down the pace of the battle, the fight definitely would have been over much earlier, as Reggie had no real answer with how to deal with Megumi inside of that domain. Megumi also has his Chimera power to mix and recycle Shikigami that he loses in battles. He has shown that he can mix and match Shikigami abilities like giving Toad Nue wings and upgrading Demon Dogs to totality, giving Megumi an extremely powerful ally to help back him up in defense as well as attack. Totality is Megumi's more proactive and useful Shikigami, and has been shown to even be able to slice and damage Hanami's hard shell, so it's even effective against special grades, and really was a main factor in Megumi's win against Reggie. Megumi has also been shown using the revealing one's hand trait in a sorcerer battle, where revealing info about a technique can have an effect on the fight, and hiding info can lead to a sorcerer's victory. And he did this in the battle against Reggie as well, and previously when forcing Shigemo to participate in the exorcism ritual. But now it's time to talk about the big elephant in the room: 8-handled sword Divergent Scylla Divine General MAHORAGA. This is Megumi's greatest trump card and his strongest Shikigami so far, giving him 7 curses in total. Now this is one particularly special case, as we get a flashback where Gojo explained to Megumi that back in the day, a 6 Eyes user and a Limitless user like Gojo and a 10 Shadows user like Megumi fought to the death, where both sides died, which is insane given how powerful Gojo was shown to be. So MAHORAGA is hinted at not giving Megumi strength, but being a trump card to handle any obstacle for Megumi as a sacrificial move. So if there's any Megumi stan out there who has that argument of, well, Megumi wins because of MAHORAGA, I respond with,
stop the cap. Stop the cap right now.
Yes, indeed, very observant, he does win. He also dies. MAHORAGA is not on anyone's side. The very first thing MAHORAGA did when he got summoned was friendly fire. He was on demon time. Megumi said it is a useless exorcism. It is essentially dropping a nuke on the battlefield, and you're right in the middle of that mess. Albeit, MAHORAGA is extremely powerful, being able to give 15-finger Sukuna trouble, and has the power to adapt to any and all phenomena. So MAHORAGA potentially is a counter to Gojo's Limitless, which would be freaking nuts. However, that power in the hands of Megumi only gives him the option of having it as a sacrificial move, unless he is able to tame the beast, which no sorcerer before him has done. And I think still, without MAHORAGA, Megumi is still on his way to becoming a powerful sorcerer. And just like Yuji, he has the potential to reach heights similar to that of Gojo eventually one day. But let's discuss some more kind of flaws Megumi has to deal with on his side. One flaw Megumi has to contend with is his tendency to be overwhelmed by rushdown type sorcerers. Megumi is shown to be a very gifted fighter and is almost like the complete opposite of Yuji in that his curse techniques accelerates and skyrockets, but his close quarters combat needs refinement. He more than compensates really with this weakness with his use of curse tools and his Shikigami, as well as using his curse technique Shadow to put the battle more into his favor. However, when faced with very close quarters heavy fighters right up in his face, right up in his grill, Megumi's flow as a fighter really starts to crumble defensively, and he needs to be quick on his feet just to be quick enough to use other strategies to gain some more ground on the battle. I think one of the biggest examples in this was his fight against the Toji puppet, in which he had no answer to deal with its speed. And another great example was the Three-Finger Sukuna fight, and both times he actually contemplated sacrificing himself and pulling out MAHORAGA. Like, it wasn't hero time, it's MAHORAGA time. I can't be the only one thinking that. But later in the Culling games, when outmatched by Reggie in CQC combat again, he had to use domain expansion. So it was really big brain on his part to actually use other strategies. And it is good, but it still is a weakness that he has to contend with. He can't really deal with people that are very close quarters fighting oriented, that they really do overwhelm him when they get right up in his grill. Another big flaw for Megumi is the conditions in which his domain needs to open up. In the Reggie versus Megumi fight, Fushiguro needed to lead Reggie into just the right space in order to cast his own barrier with the help of the gymnasium. For other domain users, no matter where they are, if they have enough cursed energy, they can make an imaginary space anywhere. There's even a step further where people like Gojo and Mahito activate their domain only for a fraction of a second, to where the curse technique takes a guaranteed effect, but no set barrier is cast. Megumi he really does have an insane domain. However, the conditions for its use at the moment, they're kind of bad, given that an opponent can keep you out in an open space, or if they're not generous enough to give you time to cast a barrier, you're kind of screwed at that point, especially against rushdown sorcerers like Yuji, who excel at close combat. The last big flaw before moving on to this theoretical fight is Megumi's overall cursed energy output, or rather just how much damage he could dish out on his own. Megumi really is well balanced in all aspects as a sorcerer, but that does not mean that he's not lacking in anything. I would say Megumi, he does have more cursed energy overall than Yuji does based on the array of moves he has at his disposal, but the raw damage Megumi can dish out on his own lacks in comparison to Yuji's heavy hits, because Yuji actually is superhuman when you think about it. Megumi does not hit hard enough on his own to end battles, but relies on his Shikigami to work with him and add damage to his own attacks. That's why Shikigami like Nue and Totality are used so often. They can attack targets and create openings for Megumi and give Megumi defensive options. Megumi, as far as we know, has not unlocked Black Flash, unlike Yuji, and that's really important because Black Flash makes it so that your cursed energy control is in the zone and your hits scale 2.5 times more than normal, so you do more damage. Megumi has sparked his growth through something like domain expansion, like in chapter 171, and the chapter literally stated in the manga, the 10 shadows technique expanded his potential to 120%. And I actually thought for a second that Megumi was going to actually do a Black Flash in that moment. That was like the perfect moment for him to land one, but he ultimately never performed it. I think he will eventually do it, but that's just not in his arsenal yet. However, Yuji, on Yuji's side, Yuji seems like a Black Flash machine. Despite that though, despite all of Megumi's flaws and everything, the sheer amount of versatility and just the all-around stat that he has, Megumi he has great tactical intellect, and what makes him so scary is just to think what he could do as a fully realized sorcerer. He has a lot going on for him and his potential is amazing. During this theoretical battle, I really want to look at a series of outcomes to see which sorcerer fares better in a all-out fight, because if I'm being honest, different factors make a huge difference in the outcome of the battle, and during this fight in particular, you could really go either way depending on the circumstances. I really want to try to stay as true to the characters as I possibly can based on what they've shown through really the whole series. But let's start with one factor, and in this fight, one huge factor would be range. Could Yuji close the gap between himself and Megumi when dealing with his Shikigami? Based on what we've seen so far, an effective way to deal with a Shikigami user would be to deal with the user themselves, and that really is a problem, especially against a 10 Shadows user who could have a wide array of combination attacks, such as something like Serpent and Nue, who could really be a nuisance for Yuji and keep him at bay. But most of Megumi's Shikigami are actually kind of like glass cannons in the fact that they are very useful and versatile, but struggle in their durability aspect. I have no doubt Yuji can keep up and easily dispatch any of Megumi's 6 main Shikigami that he uses. Yuji is a force that is exchanging blows with special grade curses on the regular, and has a ton of experience already fighting high level sorcerers and taking on curses 3 times his size. In Yuji's battle with the Curse Womb Chozo, he was able to quickly compensate for his lack of range and close the gap to test the speed of blood manipulation, trying to turn the battle more into his favor, into something like a fist fight. Unfortunately for him though, Chozo has the means to defend himself up close, mid-range, and long range. But does Megumi have an answer to Yuji's speed and his rushdown style? We actually kind of get to see this kind of moment with Reggie's fight, where Reggie thought the battle was turned into a fist fight. However, Megumi used a hidden hand using Divine Dog to catch him off guard and ultimately win the battle. In Yuji's case though, I think too, Divine Dog would likely be Yuji's most troublesome factor, in that would really be a very troublesome Shikigami, being that it is able to attack, defend, and handle neutral for Megumi. But Yuji's raw combat instinct and his awareness is just a step above Megumi, and I would argue post Shibuya Yuji would be mad hard to take by surprise. Yuji is one of the best fighters in the verse and is just naturally orientated toward combat. We see this every time he fights, especially against a curse like Mahito, who is way stronger than anything Megumi has, and Yuji was able to adapt to Mahito's transfiguration to the point where if Mahito was to get sloppy and use a messy, ineffective form, Yuji could kill him on the spot. Itadori hits a whole lot harder than Megumi does, and realistically he can one-shot any of the first 6 Shikigami Megumi has. Megumi would have to use his Shikigami in a way to keep Yuji back, maybe using something like Rabbit Escape as cover and Divine Dog to do some damage. And if he were to choose to get in up close, Megumi needs to make sure one of his Shikigami has his back while another pins down Yuji or using his shadow ability. Because if Megumi was to mess up just even a little bit, just a slight window of opportunity, Yuji would jump on it and give Megumi a nasty blow. Even if Megumi were to block, Divergent Fist is an extremely unforgiving ability, and the second impact would no doubt at least stagger Megumi, giving Yuji an opportunity to win in a decisive blow to the head. It's pretty dark, but that's not even considering Black Flash. Hanami stated both Yuji and Todo without Black Flash had enough power to individually hurt him, and adding on Black Flash multiple times is enough to kill a curse like Jogo. And I only say this because Gege stated Hanami's shell is super tough even among special grades. And heck, we even saw what Yuji's maximum input Black Flash did to the instant killing spirit Mahito in that one final blow. So with Black Flash, you could definitely argue if it's placed right, it could essentially one-shot Megumi. And we have seen some really impressive feats, durability feats from Megumi, but him just taking a Black Flash right after getting hit by Yuji would be a massive shock to his system, to say the least. And if he were to tank that hit, and it would really only give Yuji more openings. Again, I want to look at how Megumi deals with rushdown style opponents compared with Yuji. When facing Kamo Noritoshi, Megumi was crumbling defensively, trying to deal with flowing red scale. Yuji also had trouble dealing with Chozo, a much better version of Kamo, but Yuji was still in his element when having to deal with that stack amp in blood manipulation, and it is only where Chozo revealed more cards like having Blood Meteorite and Hardening that led to Yuji's defeat. Versus Todo as well, it's true that the stakes were lower in those battles, but Megumi really had a rough time trying to fight Todo with even just a few Shikigami to slow him down, whereas Yuji completely thrived in that battle against another fight CQC oriented person. He even grew during that battle and that fight enough to perform Black Flash. So Yuji being up close is really bad for Megumi if it's for a prolonged period of time. And I can see Megumi using his Shadow Dip attack, but I doubt it would really catch Yuji off guard, and Megumi should really strive to keep his distance away from Yuji and use his Shikigami to wear Yuji down. But what if Megumi's trump cards? Does the battle outcome change then? If we're going all out in this sorcerer battle, we have to consider extreme circumstances, and Megumi has a huge favor on his side. Chimera Shadow Garden is the 10 shadows technique fully turned up to 100. Using this unfinished domain lets Megumi multiply his Shikigami in a endless supply, and now there can be multiple instances of Nue, Toads, Serpent, Divine Dog, and so on. That in and of itself is scary enough, but the very environment around Yuji as well is all in Megumi's favor, and while the guaranteed hit effect is not really in play, it's basically like shooting fish in a barrel. Megumi's cursed energy control is amped, and now the very floor around Yuji is working against him. Not to mention Fushiguro's shadow is all around him, and Megumi can pop up anywhere along with a squad of Megumi shadow clones ready to beat down Yuji. All of this makes me think, does Yuji actually have an answer to even deal with this domain? Unfortunately, no. At this point in time, there is nothing Yuji has that will actually help in the domain, and once he is inside of Megumi's barrier, it is game over for him, as there is just too much advantage for Megumi in this situation. I think outside of a barrier, Yuji can definitely overwhelm Megumi and even take the victory. However, once Megumi casts the domain, the favor immediately shifts to Megumi, as Yuji doesn't have simple domain or anything. Even given the domain conditions for use, not being able to use it in something like an open area, I still think Megumi is capable of evading Yuji long enough to find a space more in his favor, and even trick Yuji if the circumstances allow. Yuji does have to close that distance after all. Megumi is very adept as a sorcerer in sorcerer battles like we have seen recently, and always has a plan in mind to cover himself. Yuji also is very adept as a sorcerer and as a fighter, and that mainly really applies to his combat instinct and his raw fighting potential. But in terms of understanding the world of curse techniques, Yuji is very vastly like handicapped. He's uninformed, and time again Yuji has lost either to overwhelming cursed energy or is just overpowered by superior cursed techniques. Technically, taking the battle into extremes like this, I have to go with Megumi on his side in this matchup, not even considering Megumi's other trump card, MAHORAGA. Megumi for sure would have to fight hard, likely one of the hardest battles that he ever fought, but if the battle were to come down to domains, Megumi would come out on top. Before wrapping up my thoughts though, let's just entertain the idea and get a little extra credit in, and just to see and entertain the idea that Yuji had inherited one of Sukuna's techniques like it was mentioned before. Would this change the outcome of the fight? I would say it would have a very large impact on how fast the battle escalates. If Yuji had Slice and Cleave, for instance, this would automatically solve Yuji's range problem, and that this battle would quickly be in Yuji's favor, even more so than it was before. All of Sukuna's abilities are more refined than nearly everyone else in the verse, and it is effective against nearly anything, including Megumi. We saw how the ability killed a finger bearer with ease, completely annihilated Nanako and Mimiko, and was integral in the defeat of MAHORAGA. I think if Yuji had this power, Megumi trying to cast a domain is at the very least the least of his concern, as the slashing attacks are invisible and Megumi would have his hands full just trying to protect himself from it. I think it's a little bit more realistic for Yuji to have more advanced application to like his already established techniques. Like he could have extra moves like a simple domain, for instance, or even in an extreme case, learn reverse curse technique. And he just needs something to push back or nullify against Megumi's domain long enough for Megumi to exhaust his moves and run out of strength. I'm sure the domain would leave Megumi exhausted and tired, just like he was right after fighting both the Finger Bear and Reggie. Again, this segment is just like a little extra theory, and my main thought already concluded with me more in favor with Megumi currently in a all-out sorcerer battle. But what of MAHORAGA as well? Can Yuji deal with the Divine General? In short, no. Yuji does not really stand any chance currently, or even if he had Sukuna's curse technique. He needs to stack curse techniques in his ability. I don't really think Yuji would be able to gain that sort of power, but really in my mind, everything involving MAHORAGA does not matter because Megumi holds no sort of control over it, and no one really wins when MAHORAGA is out. It'd really be a different story if Megumi had some sort of vow or temporary control over MAHORAGA, but sadly, again, no one wins when it is out and it's a sacrificial move. And really a draw, having the battle as a draw simply is just not good enough for this sort of what if made up battle. In short, this was a very fun and kind of difficult video to make. Looking back in the series, Megumi is a lot more favorable as a sorcerer, even if he is not as physically strong or battle driven like Yuji is. I was actually heavily in favor for Yuji to win, but putting Megumi's domain into the mix really sealed the deal, as Yuji has no proper counter for dealing with proper curse techniques and especially domains. You could actually argue the fight would end before it even got to that point, but I really wanted to consider an all-out fight with everyone using their best moves. I actually like canonically in the manga how Megumi and Yuji have more of a wholesome friendship and rivalry in the series, and after the Goodwill event, Megumi acknowledged Yuji's strength as well as his own weaknesses, saying that he'd surpass him, and now both Yuji and Megumi stand together now in the forefront of the Koen games, ready to save Japan as well as their own teacher Gojo. Both of them are far stronger when they work together, and I'm really excited to see just how high they will go in terms of power. Thank you all so much for checking out this video, and if you stay to the end, you truly are a brother. But please remember to like, share, and subscribe, as well as comment your thoughts on this video and which side you chose. I would love to hear it. I think I will continue to do more versus videos and continue like this versus series, and even try to expand to more manga in the future. But that's it for this one, guys. This has been Enemy Stand User, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.